Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Wisdom from the Akasha Podcast. My name is Suzie, I am your host, and I am an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. Today I'm going to do the first episode of what I hope are going to be many episodes called Meet the Graduates. And my intention behind this little mini-series that I'm going to do with former students of mine over the coming 12 months is to give you the opportunity to hear from some people who have done the Akashic Records training, how they work with the Akashic Records, how they found the Akashic Records, and what they're now doing with this. My first guest is Jillian McDonald. Jillian is based in Canada. She is an energy healer. She is a spiritual teacher and channel, and she really focuses on utilizing modalities such as the Akashic Records, Reiki, Yoni work, womb healing work, with the aim that these modalities, she can help you become your most aligned, most empowered self. So without further ado, please meet Jillian. And of course, as always, I will put contact details, website, and everything else for Jillian, so you can give her a follow on social media and hear more from her directly. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation, and I will see you next week for the next episode.
Welcome, Jillian, to the Wisdom from the Akasha Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. So, as I've just explained in the introduction, this is going to be a Meet the Graduate series that I'm going to be doing. And of course, you were the first person that I thought of from the work that we've done over the years. And I just wanted to invite you on to talk about your own journey with the Akashic Records, because everyone's journey is going to be different. And if you can share with the audience your journey, also how you found the Akashic Records to be helpful on your spiritual journey over the years, and anything that you'd like to share, and we'll just have a conversation and let it go very, very naturally.
That sounds great. Sounds good to me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. And yeah, the Akashic Records are life-changing. So I'm hoping that when people hear this, they're inspired to give it a go.
They certainly are. So, Jillian, if you want to talk about how the Akashic Records first came into your awareness, because one of the things that I always say to people is the Akashic Records don't come into your awareness by mistake. There's this kind of coming into your awareness, and then there's this unfoldment process. And oftentimes what will happen is we'll hear about the Akashic Records, or a post will take our interest, and we kind of go, well, that sounds interesting. And then we go off about our daily life. So if you want to talk a little bit about first how they came into your awareness.
Definitely. So years ago, I took my Reiki training. And when that happened, my life started completely shifting. And I was sort of guided in the direction that was best for my soul. And after the pandemic, I was on social media and I was scrolling, and I'd always been really interested in like past life regressions, and I'd done a couple of those, and like the Galactic stuff. I was so mesmerized with all of that information, but I didn't really know how I was going to tie that into what I was already doing. And to be honest, I didn't really think I had those gifts. I just thought I was an energy healer. I had never tried channeling before. And I was on social media, and somehow you popped up on my social media, and everything that you were saying was like hitting me right in the heart, right in the soul. You see a lot on social media, but there's like what you see, and then there's the true truth. Like the truth that you know is just like, yes, that's the truth. And so your posts were like hitting that spot for me of like, this is what I believe. Yes, this is the truth. This feels real. And so I started looking through your social media, and I think you had just started offering your level 1. So like accessing your own records, because at the time it was like a really like entry price point.
Yeah.
And I was definitely not rolling in the cash at the time. So I wouldn't have been able to, like, if it had been a huge price point at that time, I might have been like, oh, well, another time. But it just so happened that it was going to fit into my budget. So I was like, well, I'll try it out because like this feels legit to me. And so I joined your class, and you had us go into the records to practice and to start channeling. And some of the information that started coming through was things I had never thought before, and was information that I wouldn't have just pulled out of my butt. It was like
Yeah.
information that I wouldn't have considered. So I was like, oh, okay, this is real. This is working. And you were teaching us about the different clair senses and about the inner knowing clair sense. And I had never considered that that was a clair sense, but it's absolutely my strongest clair sense. So that was really validating for me because I just didn't think that was a thing. And then, so of course I went on and I took level 2 and I started doing my practice sessions with people. And that was even more clear than when I was doing it on myself. The stuff that was coming through was so not things I could have made up. And it was resonating with the people so deeply. And I actually was starting to get visuals and other kind of clair senses started activating for me at that time. And it was just like, I was like, okay, I just know I could do this. It was like easy for me. And so it was just something I was like, I guess this is what I can do now. And I'm the type where when I like something like that, I go 2 feet in. And it was the same with my Reiki training. Like, I'll do as many practice sessions as I can. And so I did that. I like whipped through my practice sessions. And yeah, the rest is kind of history at that point. I took the learning to heal and clear because I already had quite a background in energy healing. So that also came quite naturally to me and just went from there. A cool thing with the Akashic Records is that I'd been on my spiritual journey for quite some time, but I hadn't done the lower chakra work to the extent that the Akashic Records take you through. And so they guided me to Yoni and womb healing. And I've spent the last couple years really digging out those lower chakras, which has given me so much more awareness. And I just see things so much differently and more clearly now. So they've guided me and helped me on my path immensely since discovering them. And I do think that, I know you've said before that once you start working with the records, you're kind of always working with them. And I definitely feel that. My connection with my guides is so strong now. And that was not something I ever had access to or understood before as well.
Well, thank you. So it's so lovely just hear and see. And obviously, I've kind of seen you all the way through the journey and just grow in confidence. And I always say, as teachers, our job isn't to teach you something, it's to help you remember, because you can do all of these things, but it's to help you remember, it's to guide, and it's to help you build that confidence. And my intention with my classes is always that by the time you finish training with me, you feel confident, you know? And I love the fact that you noted as well that reading for other people is so much easier than reading for yourself. It's always the way. Ego gets so involved in your own Akashic Records process. It is something you just have to work through. Thought it was really interesting what you said about the cognizance, because I think this is a common misconception where people diminish what are called the Lunar Claires. So Lunar Claires is just the internal clair senses. So they're more connected to our internal divine feminine or our lunar channels. And the dominant ones tend to be cognizance and sentience. So that clear knowing and that clear feeling. But I think what happens a lot of the time is people have that and they've always had it. So they just think that it's not a psychic ability. It's not an intuitive ability. It's not part of the clairs. They're waiting for the visuals and for the audience, which absolutely do come. And it's funny because they do often come when you start being a practitioner. It's like you start to turn on clairs that maybe you've not used before. But I'd love to hear from your experience as someone who has clair cognizance as the strongest, how you built that confidence in the knowings that you were getting were actually psychic information, intuitive information, rather than thinking, oh, I'm just making it up. So I know that's always one of the biggest questions students have. How do I know when I'm making it up?
Well, I think you're totally right about it just kind of being always there and almost not recognizing that that was just always there. My clairsentience, which is the feeling, that's also a really strong one that I have. And I loved your post about the lunar and the solar difference because that was the first time I'd seen it worded like that. And so I think for me, actually doing the inner work of feeling through my emotions and learning the different voices in my head was really crucial in being able to understand what is that inner knowing versus what might be a voice from my past or a past trauma. Or
Yeah.
I know for a lot of people, their intuition gets mixed up with fear and trauma. So for me, it actually has just really developed with getting to know myself better, doing that inner work, which I know isn't that exciting of an answer, but
It's the truth. It's
but
the
it's
truth.
it's what it is. And now I can very clearly hear, even for myself, which, like how you mentioned, it's easier to read for other people at the beginning. Now it has actually become that my own readings on myself have become that much clearer. And even if I am in a moment of panic or struggle or scarcity, there is like this voice or this knowing that comes in now, and it instantly settles me because I have the ability to recognize what is that voice versus what might be a trauma voice or a scarcity voice.
It might not be a sexy answer, but it
Yeah.
is the truth. So you can't avoid the work, and you can't avoid those lower chakras. So I'd love if you would share a bit more about your journey, because I know that it was something you didn't really want to do. As most people don't. Most people want to be up in the higher chakras. I think if I had a pound for every time I talked about the root chakra and the importance of stabilizing the nervous system, I'd be a very rich lady. But I'd love if you'd share the way that you decided, okay, it's time, and the process that you went through, because it is hard work and it isn't the exciting part of the journey, but it is so crucial and it does bring so much to fruition.
Yeah, I think my initial answer is like, well, I didn't really choose. It kind of just started to happen, and I just was like, okay, I guess this is happening. But I guess in a sense I did choose because I'd set intentions about what I wanted, and I knew that it's like, well, the inner knowing, right? I knew that it was what I had to do in order to get to this other side. But I do think that having the healings and clearings kind of just put my life on a path where I didn't really have a choice other than to sit with the things that I needed to sit with. So my intentions were that, like, I'll do whatever I have to do to be my most authentic self. That's kind of always been my life motto. Like, I want to be on the highest timeline. I'll do whatever it takes. And so I think sometimes I do, in that sense, set myself up for the fast track, I guess. So sometimes my life can be quite chaotic or emotional. When I had my first healing and clearing with you, I was in a not so good relationship. And through working with you, because we did some one-on-one coaching as well, I made the choice to leave and I moved back home. And I moved on into my grandma's house, which is the land I grew up on. And so my root chakra was literally planted in the place where all of these memories and emotions and traumas were stored. And honestly, I kind of just tried to stay in the present moment as much as possible and felt through everything. So if something came up that made me mad, I let myself be mad. If I felt lonely, I just sat in that feeling. And through practice with that, I learned that on the other side, there's always clarity. And so it was at the beginning, I did have to trust and be like, okay, I don't actually know what's going to happen, but this is how I'm feeling. And then through practice, I was like, okay, there's always clarity on the other side. And so then it made it easier to sit with those emotions because I knew, okay, I might not have the answer right now, but once I let myself go there, I will have the answer. And the Akashic Records, I believe, guided me to Yoni and womb healing. And with that, there's not really a lot of words for how that works because it is so feminine and energetic, and my mind was always trying to rationalize things or figure out why I was having an emotion or whatever else. And through doing that more deeper embodiment work and embodiment practices, I realized that my mind doesn't always have to be involved. Sometimes it can be done without having to think about things. I do have another thing that made me want / need to do the work is that I work for myself. And so I need money. And if I'm not in alignment and in flow, then the money isn't in alignment and in flow. So it kind of puts, I don't want to say pressure, but a little bit of like, okay, you better figure this out because you need to get to a place where you're going to be happy and abundant and thriving instead of surviving. And so it made it more of a forefront of my journey was like, okay, well, we do need to live. So even though it's uncomfortable, you better do it. And then with that came relationship healing as well. I really desire to have that sacred union and that partner. And so I'm just willing to do what it takes and sit in whatever I got to sit in to achieve what I want, basically.
And that is the radical self-responsibility aspect of the Akashic Records. That's one of the things that I love about the Akashic Records is, first of all, no matter what's going on, life is always going to bring you every lesson, everything that you need. So you don't have to go digging for things. Our part in the journey is to acknowledge our role. So when, as you said, anger comes up, that we sit in the anger, we move that anger through our body, we transmute it, or we acknowledge, okay, this is somewhere I've got to do a bit of work on. And that's that radical self-responsibility where we take responsibility for our own healing, for our own journey. Yes, we can have teachers, mentors, coaches, all wonderful, all amazing, but ultimately the book stops with us. And as you said, when you're a business owner, it's really important that you're taking radical self-responsibility, that you're the one sat there going, right, this is something that's come up. I've got to deal with this. Otherwise, I am going to contract. I am going to stop that flow. And I am going to put myself into a position that I don't want to be in. So now that you are a fully fledged Akashic Records practitioner, how has that journey been, that journey of service? How has that evolved over time for you?
One thing is you really realize how big of a role your guides and your higher self play in life. And I love what you said there about you don't need to go digging for things. I think that has been really huge in how I provide service as well, because I'm very intentional. And before all my sessions, and I do some coaching as well, I always set the intention that it's going to play out for the highest good, that you're going to receive whatever you need. And there's this trust that I have in my guides and also in the guides of everyone I work with that I don't really have to do anything. They're going to be presented with whatever they need in the moment that is going to be for their highest good. So I like that you said that you don't have to go digging, because I think that is also a really important thing. You'll be brought whatever you need. How it's evolved for me, I've sort of started to build, I guess, a bit of a community. I really realized the importance of, yes, doing all the lower chakra work, but also we're not just a lower chakra. We are also our higher self. And so I am so passionate about giving people the opportunity to see that and to really learn how to ask for that help and how to connect with that part of themselves, because we are all sovereign beings. And just like you, I want people to be able to learn that they can take care of themselves and do it for themselves and basically learn how to live as both their higher self and their lower self. So my readings, I don't really attract a lot of people. I know you've mentioned this before, which you probably have in your podcast episodes, but I don't have a lot of, when am I going to meet my soulmate? Or is this person I don't get a lot of that. I do tend to attract the people that are wanting to do the work, that have these dreams and want to know who they really are, but also the people who want to enjoy life. And I think enjoying life does come with knowing who you are. That's how you can make the best decisions. That's how you can know your intuition. That's how you can give love and compassion towards yourself, in those moments of emotions. I think that's been one of the hardest parts for me, is to shift the lens of what am I doing wrong and what do I need to fix into I'm doing my best and I need to love myself through this emotion that I'm feeling right now. So releasing that shame has been so huge. And I know just with my journey, I know how difficult it can be to be a human. And I think I tend to attract other humans that are also feeling that. I used to want to give people as much information as possible. And over time, I've learned that sometimes less is more, and that you don't have to give them all 75 of their past lives. You can just tell them about the part that's relevant, or the main theme that's maybe going on in their life at this time. But yeah, I love to do readings. And now that I've been doing it for a while, I even have people that come back 2 years later. Just last week, I had a girl who said, oh my God, I just read our reading from 2 years ago and wow, things have changed and things were so accurate. And
Mhm.
I do really love the cool moments when something like one of those aha moments happen, or I still get just as excited if I'm like, oh, there's a dog and it looks like this. And they're like, that's my dog. Like when you have those really validating moments, that still really lights me up. Those are probably my favorite moments in readings. But yeah, I incorporate the Akashic Records into all of the work that I do, and I work with them in my own business now and in my coaching sessions, and I think that's probably been the biggest change is like actually really being able to connect with my guides in every day and in everything I do in my business. I don't know if that really answered your question.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And I think one of the things as a practitioner, and I'm sure anyone who's a practitioner who's listening will know this, that the more work you do with the records, the more you don't actually have to sit and consciously set the intention, go through the process. You're just constantly in communication with them and they're always there. They're always willing to help. And it's just building to that place. And it takes a bit of time and it takes a bit of practice, but once you've got it, it's fabulous and they can help so much. One thing that I know you're very passionate about is energy work. Okay. I know you've done Reiki, you've done clearings. How has that journey of evolution happened for you? Because I know when I teach people who are energy healers, they're naturally very, very good at it. They often come with what's the best way to say this? I think a little bit of a savior complex, kind of people pleasing in overdrive, where they have this huge weight of responsibility on them that, in this one session, they have to fix this client. And I love that you just said then, you shifted in your own internal practice to, I don't have to fix this. I have to give myself space and I have to hold myself. So how has that journey been for you, being able to evolve as a healer and know that it's not your responsibility to fix everything for somebody? It's more about that holding space, being able to help that person heal themselves. How's that journey been?
Definitely. Yeah, you're right on with like the people pleasing. Like that was one thing I had thought I had healed my people pleasing when I met you, and I definitely hadn't. It is a very tricky and complex. Like people pleasing to me is so general. And when I say it, I know exactly what it means. But I think sometimes there's a misconception with what people pleasing is.
Mhm.
Um, and so, honestly, it all comes down to trust. And once again, I think through doing my own inner work and seeing the shifts in my life and how trusting has really just allowed so much to change rather than that wanting to control everything, which I think is another thing. Like with the savior complex, there's also the need to control. Every so often, I do still have a client where I'm like, I really want to be able to help them. Like, please give me what it is that I need to share. But I have definitely released a lot of that control. And so my sessions are very guided by the higher power, but guided by the guides. I really now trust that whatever's meant to happen for their highest good will. And I do reiterate that a lot to my clients as well. I make sure that they know I'm not going to be the one to save or fix them, and that it is going to play out for the highest good. And that is a reason I like the coaching in some aspects, because it gives me the opportunity to build a relationship with people rather than just a one-off session. So we can come back to the same issues. And I find that for myself, as my energy evolves and expands, then when people are in my energy, it allows their energy to also evolve and expand. So when I can say something with conviction, like it's going to work out, we just have to trust. When I say it, it almost holds more weight because it is actually my real belief and it's actually what I've seen, versus if they are trying to tell themselves like, just trust, but
Yeah.
they've never been trusted in their life. So the sessions flow a lot easier, and they hardly takes any energy from me because I'm not the one doing the work. I'm not trying to direct the energy. I'm just letting it go where it needs to go. And my energy healing has also evolved over time as well, where I'm now accessing different dimensions of light, and different symbols sometimes come in. And I think I gave myself permission to step outside the imaginary boxes that I had made for myself with different modalities, and allowed myself to be shown. It's so hard to describe with words, but I see the quantum realms differently, and I see time and space differently when I do sessions too. And so in that way, my sessions actually do become more powerful because the work is going that much deeper, but it's not necessarily me doing it. I'm doing it, but it's not me doing it, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. And I
that
think
makes
that
sense.
that permission slip of like, they're going to get whatever they need has
Mhm.
only worked because I've tried, true, tested it on myself so many times.
Oh, absolutely. And trust and surrender are two of the hardest lessons you'll ever get on your spiritual journey. When it comes to that point where it's like, right, now it's time for trust, now it's time to surrender. What I found in my journey, and I know certainly what lots of people I've worked with find, you'll trust and surrender, and then you'll start to edge back into, well, actually, I'm going to be a little bit of a micromanager here, and I'm going to try and control this. And I see this a lot, especially with spiritual business owners, where they're trusting and surrendering, they're taking the aligned action, and then aligned action moves into control. And it's such a slight shift, but it completely changes it from an energetic perspective. And I think that only by going through that journey yourself and seeing it bearing fruits and seeing how important it is to align to that flow and take the aligned action, can you then learn. But it does take a few goes, definitely, of, okay, I'm going to trust, I'm going to surrender, I'm going to get, and you feel amazing and it's wonderful. And then you start to shift into control mode and the ego starts to get involved. And then you have to check yourself and say, right, okay, time to trust and surrender again. I'm turning into a little bit of a micromanager here. And it's hard. And it's especially hard if you've had childhood trauma, if you have not been able to trust people in your life, if you've been betrayed, if you've had situations happen to you. Trusting and surrendering is a hard job. So I just want to reiterate to anyone who's listening that Jillian and I both acknowledge how hard it is. This is not just trust, just surrender. We know how hard it is, but it is worthwhile. It is worthwhile bearing with it. One thing I would like you to touch on, if you don't mind, because you mentioned it, is the galactic side of things. I know everybody's listening and they're like, she mentioned galactic. Let's talk about the aliens. So talk to me about your experience in the galactic side of things. I know that was something that came very naturally to you as a student. What I would say to everyone who's listening is that when you learn a modality like the Akashic Records, everybody reads differently. And that's one of the most beautiful and amazing things about the Akashic Records. And what I see as a teacher when I have students is certain students will really have a knack for something. And for Jillian, it was the galactic side of things. So I'd love if you'd share a little bit about that.
Yes. So I've always felt not from here, I guess. I've never really felt that not anymore, but in my younger years, I didn't feel comfortable in my skin. I had the body dysmorphia and all of those things. And I was always seeking happiness and those high vibrations. Like I had substance abuse issues in the past, and like spiritual bypassing was huge for me. And I always wanted to be in that like higher frequency. And through my reading with you, I learned that I am an Andromedan starseed, which means my soul actually comes from the 12th dimension, which is way different than the third dimension. And so I think I naturally gravitate towards the galactics because that is what feels more like home to me. And I think it's also so important to understand that there is so much more than just our third dimensional world and Earth. And it's helped me with my perspective of the collective consciousness, because Earth herself is a collective, but then she's inside a collective of someone else, which is inside a collective of something else. And it goes so much bigger and bigger. And I think just because my soul itself is big, that it just feels natural to want to learn about these bigger and higher realms and what's going on outside of Earth, kind of like that really zoomed out perspective, which I also think can make being on Earth easier when you're able to understand and see things from that perspective. we always talk about masculine and feminine energy. And I think having an understanding about the spiritual laws and the spiritual journey and the way that the nature of the soul and all of these things that are easy to understand from a galactic perspective, I think having that framework for my masculine energy has helped me with healing the feminine energy as well. And I just find it so fascinating. I actually, it's so funny. Even this summer, I was out for a walk one day, and I just had this thought, of course, this coincidental thought of, well, if I really believed that I was an Andromedan being who was just here on Earth for maybe my second time, like, how would I be interacting with this environment around me? And so I started looking at the world so differently of like, hey, here I am on Earth. Like, oh my gosh, that's a tree. Like, well, that's fun because like other planets aren't like this. There is no physicality in the higher realms. And so being here on Earth in this physical realm is actually quite a treat. And so I started just operating as more of that star seed self rather than just my human self. And it makes life that much more enjoyable. And so I like to be able to give that, I guess, like magic to other people. I was always a big magic girl when I was little, and magic is real. It very much is real. And I think when we get to tap into that frequency and start to actually view the world from that perspective, it really changes the way that your heart operates and the gratitude and the emotions that you're able to allow in, because it's like, holy crap, yeah, I am here on this planet. Right now, Earth is my home. It's not just my house or my town that's my home. It's actually Earth that is my home. And so, yeah, I love to be able to give people that more expanded perspective of their soul as well, and kind of that home remembrance and yeah, just the magic and fun of it, I think, too.
I love that because so many more people are tuning into or becoming aware of this cosmic consciousness, it's not all just about this planet and what's going on here. That's all part of this much bigger system. But I think what can happen sometimes for people on their spiritual journey is they'll start to maybe have dreams about being in different planets. Things look different, or they'll start to have beings approach them. And it can really freak people out. And I think when you're able to connect with somebody like Jillian, who's able to really connect you into and understand that side, it can take that fear away and it can help people then expand and open up into that. So if people want to connect with you, which I'm sure they will after this beautiful conversation, how do they find you? How do they work with you? Where are you on the social medias at the moment? Tell us everything about what you're doing.
Totally. I would say my home base is kind of my Instagram page. So it's authenticyu.healing. And that's where I really have the conglomeration of all of my services. So bringing that higher self down into the human experience and living as that soul self. So I do offer my energy healing. I teach Reiki as well for people who are maybe just sticking their toe in the door and just wanting to, because we all have to start somewhere. And I know there's a lot of conceptions about Reiki, but it really is a great starting point and it expands. And then, of course, I do the readings and the healings and clearings in the Akashic Records. I love to do those. And I also do Yoni and womb healing as part of, like we talked about earlier, how important embodiment and the lower chakra work is. I like to offer those services to the people who need some guidance or direction or support in that area. And for people who are really interested in working, I have one-on-one coaching in a more limited capacity, but if you're one of the first 2 or 3, you might be able to get in there. I have recently expanded to do some readings on YouTube and TikTok. So I kind of just feel into themes. So I've done a video about money. I've done one about Mother Earth. I've done one about the Galactics as well and all the different star seeds and more general topics that I just find people are curious about. So if you're wanting more Akashic Record stuff, that's like a really good place to go. And I have some little more out there conspiracy theory type videos on my Patreon that they don't allow on YouTube.
Yeah.
So that's also an avenue if you're curious about some of the more taboo type things that might be happening on the planet. then that's also an option. That one's fun.
I love that. I love that. So thank you so much for your time today, Jillian. I will, of course, put all of your contact details for people to reach out to you. Jillian has such a big heart. She's such a loving soul, and she genuinely does always bring her light into the room. So if anybody's listening and you're feeling like I'd really love to work with Jillian, I know you do online sessions, so you are based in Canada, but she does do sessions online. So anyone, anywhere in the world, reach out to Jillian, get a session from her. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your journey with me and with my listeners. So really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for all you've taught me. You are a big, crucial player in my life's journey. So I'm happy for everything that has happened.
So it's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you expand even further, my love.
Oh, thank you.